The Democratised Transport, Logistics and Allied Workers Union, Detawu, over the weekend launched a nationwide campaign to strengthen its bargaining power to deal with the challenges faced by its sector. Now, the union says that it's been strengthened by Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi's assertion that its shop stewards, if the shop stewards were effective, the industry would have prioritised hiring more locals than foreign nationals. Now, Detawu is also accusing the Minister of passing the buck, given that this department is responsible for formulating labour policies. Nxesi has been saying that the government is planning to put restrictions in place in order to look at the number of foreign nationals working in certain sectors of the economy. Labour Minister Nxesi was unavailable for today's interview, but we are joined by Detawu's General Secretary, Vusi Ntshangase, who joins us now. Mr. Ntshangase, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning, Sakina, and morning to your viewers.
So Detawu launched Operation Cooler on Saturday. Please tell us more about this.
No, thanks, Sakina, once more. We think that first and foremost, perhaps, let's say that as much as we appreciate the comments and the contribution by the Minister of Labour in relation to the challenges facing the road freight industry, which in our view could easily escalate to other industries if not managed properly. But we think the Minister missed an important, a very important basic principle that the people who live in glass houses shouldn't be throwing stones. Because the Minister is heading a very essential department that ought to be central in dealing and managing the scourge of employment of illegal immigrants in the road freight. But very unfortunately, and frankly speaking, the Minister and his department has done absolutely nothing from a policy position to make the department capable and capacitated enough to deal with the rising scourge of employment of illegal immigrants, which in our view, and based on our knowledge, is not only concentrated in the road freight industry. It is overlapping in many other industries, including the private security sector, for instance. So the employment of illegal immigrants is a reality, and it could easily be, before we know, a ticking bomb in the country. But we did not want to throw the baby with the dirty waters, in that from what the Minister said, we considered that to a great extent there is an element of truth in it, in that trade unions have been extremely weakened in the past decade or so. And that, as you know, trade unions are supposed to be playing as watchdogs in different workplaces and policing their employers in ensuring that they comply to the statutes. But as a result of the disfranchisation and the disintegrations of trade unions, employers has exploited the vacuum and the empty space to, as much as possible, expedite the employment of illegal immigrants, purely to ensure that they bypass the statutes, they do not comply to the industry agreements for purposes of maximizing their profit. And as a union, in responding and taking up the Minister's challenge, this past weekend we were launching our national Operation Cooler Detawu. This operation is intended to grow the union and to increase our footprints in the road freight industry and to other sectors which are also affected by the prevalence of employment of illegal immigrants. And we think that if that is successful, because we believe it shall, and this campaign is meant to run for the next 36 months. If it is successful, we think we will be able, through our capacitated shop stewards, to monitor employers, to play our oversight and our policing role effectively and ensure that the shop stewards pick up this employment of illegal immigrants as and when it happens in many various places. But unfortunately, this Sakina has also created an opportunity for union badgers in the industry, because employers will know that illegal immigrants are very often than not resistant in joining trade unions, in fear of losing their employments and in fear of them being exposed. And that has made the penetration in some companies a bit difficult for trade unions. But we think that these operations that we have launched will help a great deal in responding to the unfortunate reality that the minister has thrown on us as organized labor.
So, and as you allude to it, the minister has said that weakened trade unions, could have perhaps also prevented, if the trade unions were stronger rather, they could have prevented issues such as the violence that has been wreaking havoc in the trucking industry since 2018. So, to your view, now that you've outlined some of the touch points with regard to the consequences of weakened labour unions, what would have been the case? How would things have been different if the unions were stronger?
Well, that is a very important and central question to the problem confronting the industry. The role of the Department of Labour and the Department of Labour itself has been unfortunately missed and completely missing in the bigger scheme of things when it comes to deal with these challenges. And the minister has presented absolutely no alternative in relation to position the department and strengthening it from both a policy position and a human capital from an inspectorate point of view. The department is completely unable to pick up these abnormalities as and when they happen and penalize and fine those that are responsible for this. So the department cannot be exonerated from the problem as the minister is trying to hide behind his thumb. But like I'm saying, that ours as organized labor, if you look at the current statistics now, organized labor in the road freight industry, for instance, and this trend is going and overlapping to other industries, is currently sitting at less than 30% in terms of its representation. And the bargaining council is standing legally because employers' representation is meeting the required threshold in that they are above 50%. And that on its own, to us, it's a problem because it tilts the balance of forces in the bargaining council itself when it comes to the policy formulation in favor of employers, because labor is at the back foot, is weak, is less represented. So we think by bringing and increasing the number of organized workers in the industry, that will capacitate us and strengthen and make and put us in a position as organized labor where we are able to see and pick up this thing as early as possible. But the violence, the regrettable and unfortunate violence that is taking place in the industry, which undermines the economy at large, and unfortunately our government, through the various departments, including the Department of Employment and Labour, has presented no alternative solution to respond to the problem. But if indeed organized labor was strong enough with shop stewards who are capacitated at plant level, where they hold their regular meetings with their employers, they would have easily picked up this rise of employment of illegal immigrants and put a stop on it, or at least raise a bell or raise an alarm for the union leadership to intervene, and including reporting it to the Department of Labour for the extremely compromised inspectorate department of the Department of Labour to intervene.
Okay, so I'm not getting any clearer to solutions, essentially, but you make two very important concessions or admissions. One, the issue of shop stewards and their ineffectiveness. You're basically saying that if the shop stewards were effective, if they were present on the ground, on the shop floor, they would have sounded the alarm bell before the hiring of non-South Africans over locals actually reached crisis levels. That's the one. And then the second admission that you make is that you essentially are weak as labour unions, and therefore I'm concerned about the sort of agreement struck at the bargaining council, because if your representation is not optimal, is not as good as it should be on the shop floor, who then is held to these ultimate resolutions that you come up with at the bargaining council?
Thanks once more, my sister. The concession that we are making has unfortunately its own serious follow-up challenges. And if you were to do your own feasibility study in many of the private industry bargaining council, look at the recently signed agreements. Those agreements will tell you that indeed organized labor has been weakened to an extent, and that the balance of forces are not in favor of organized labor, and that organized labor is quite aware that workers are in majority are not organized, and the best way organized labor can be aggressive and be offensive in the negotiation platform is when you know that we have got a reasonable constituency behind you, and that when you reject the offer from employers, you can be able to pull up a strike that is strong enough to make employers regret their action and to bring them into the table with a revised mandate.
So are you saying, if I may interject, Mr. Ntshangase, are you therefore saying that at the moment you are unable to do that because you don't have the necessary might with which to effect that?
Not to the extent we would want, not to the extent workers would appreciate. And you would realize the outcome of negotiations through collective agreements in many bargaining councils has not been accepted with jubilation by workers as it ought to have been, because it's not a better deal that workers would have appreciated, but it's a deal that organized labor took under the circumstances, appreciating the weaknesses in as far as pulling a serious, sustainable fight back in that regard.
Just a final question, Mr. Ntshangase. In your view, who is a foreigner? And given, the current situation that we are seeing playing out in South Africa, given the blight that has been posed in our landscape by xenophobic incidents and in instances people have been killed, how would you deal with this issue in a very effective way?
As Detawu, we are opposed. We are very much opposed to employment of illegal immigrants. To us, illegal immigrants are those people who are in the country undocumented, are those people who are in the country without a work permit. And this is happening in the midst of the rising unemployment and poverty. And obviously, it is likely to fuel the tension between foreigners and South Africans, because foreigners, many of them are sitting at home, unemployed, with relevant skills, with relevant requisite driving skills. So anyone who is employed by any industry and in any industry without proper documentation, with no work permit, we remain opposed to that, and we discourage that. Part of
Mr. Ntshangase,
our campaign will be looking at that.
I apologize, but if you look at your screen, you'll see, as I'm seeing right now, it is 9 o'clock, so we are unfortunately out of time. But all the same, appreciate your input and sentiments this morning. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Vusi Ntshangase, Detawu's General Secretary, talking to us about the union's intention to strengthen its bargaining power in order to influence policy decisions. That's all we have time for this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. See you again tomorrow morning. It's time for the agenda.